largely we've neglected that a little bit, probably internally. We haven't really been externally talking about it in a while either, but more importantly, internally, we've not sort of been talking about it in a great way. So I had said to Jason that I was kind of like tick the PR megaphone box in terms of telling our story, because I really feel like that will really help internally with some of the struggles that we're having. And specifically, we started to talk about a couple of use cases that I was sort of really excited about what kind of been brewing in Pearson, and wondered what the best way to kind of get those written up. And I just sort of explained to him that we were under a lot of pressure around headcount at the minute, so I'm sort of double hatting, and it's just one of those things that we just keep putting sort of to the side. And then I remembered that a couple of years ago we had an external case study written for us, and I was like, I wonder if Jason can find me someone who can help us tell our story, and then, you know, that would kind of tick that off the list, and then we can kind of then focus on that PR piece of getting that story shared far and wide. So that's kind of like the context and the first piece, if you like. And then the second piece is actually what's happening. So what I had talked to Jason about is our advocate community as being one of the examples. And the reason I'd picked our advocate community is because it's only in its infancy. It's only been sort of live for 6 months. But we have really applied some of the best practice, the secret sauce, if you will, that we tell all of our, you know, users of Neo, anybody that comes to us, like, oh, how can I get really good engagement with this program or activity? And we literally drank our own Kool-Aid and did all of the things that, you know, we tell everyone to do. And we've had, you know, phenomenal success in terms of the levels of engagement. So I was telling Jason, it's not a complete story. It's like part one, if you like, of what we're trying to achieve. But what I thought would be really nice is to kind of angle it as, you know, what do you do if you're a mature community? You're not going after, you know, new user base. You're not trying to engage people. You're not really trying to get leadership buy-in. You're actually now just business as usual, trying to make programs work. And you're constantly competing with, you know, other programs, getting people's attention. So, you know, what is it that really helps drive the engagement for a community? And, you know, those things have been about us having, you know, a rigorous content plan, awesome content, and really applying some best community manager principles. So that was the first story that we were talking about. And then similarly, we've had some really great successes that have happened, and we haven't even noticed that they've happened, with a couple of our marketing communities, specifically Global English. It has like climbed its way up to be the #1 most viewed community within Neo. And that's really because the people who've been driving it have been also applying those same principles. So I thought, instead of it just being like, you know, the Neo team going, yeah, look, aren't we awesome? Actually, if we could sort of top and tail it with, you know, another group who actually have done it without our help, but they have applied those principles, then it would be, you know, an interesting sort of second angle, if you like. And what's also really interesting about that is that the person who's really driving that and leading it is from another company who also had Jive. So it sort of starts to tell this story that, you know, Jive is almost like a competency, and depending on where you work, you know, you take those skills with you. I mean, you might broaden it out a bit more to be ESN, but I think, you know, if it's something we're doing in partnership with you, we'll just talk Jive. But that was really nice because they, the lady who used to work at Macmillan, they also have a Jive community. So she came in, and I actually had a conversation with her on Monday, and she was like, oh my God, no, your Jive community is so much better. And it's because we're on cloud. And she was like, so I just, you know, started at Pearson and was able to jump straight in, you know, and in like 3 months, she is the #1 community in Pearson. So, you know, kudos to her and the team that are behind that, but it's a good example of like applying best practice. So, and then we've got a couple of other sort of other communities. Australia is a really nice sort of rounded use case where we have like the guy at the top, the leader, is demonstrating really great best practice, but then kind of as a bottom up, there's lots of activity happening, people getting their work done, using it for communication, etc. So there's this really nice mixture of stories that we've got that we would love to tell. I was just sort of begging Jason to help me tell those stories as we're kind of a bit pushed for time. And then what I said was, once we've got that kind of really, really clear story, then, you know, get me out talking about it wherever you like. So I'm happy to do, you know, the circuit of the various different ESN events and employee communications events that we've done in the past, which I had said to Jason I didn't really want to do many more of, because I felt like I was just telling the same old story. And I think people were getting a bit sick of hearing the Pearson story. But actually, I think this is something a bit different, a bit fresh. And it's something I've been talking quite a lot to Rachel Miller from the employee comms crowd, and she does, oh my God, her website's just, I was talking to her this morning. And we were talking about, like, the ESN conversation is getting a little bit dull. Everyone is sort of like telling the same stuff still, and especially now Facebook are on that circuit, and they're just, you know, churning out, oh, this leader did a Facebook status update, and oh, you know, we're having these conversations. And it's like, yeah, but we were doing that 7 years ago. Let's change this conversation now. Let's make this conversation about business value, about driving ROI for the organization, about partnering, you know, with the business to actually meet their needs, rather than, you know, it just being about adoption and getting leaders to blog. So that was kind of the conversation we had. The only thing I would say that sort of Jason probably doesn't know about that I've mentioned there is that English community, because I only had that conversation on Monday. So I knew that the community was like rising to the top. I just didn't know why. And then she happened to be at an event that I was at, and we got talking, and I was like, now I understand. You're like some sort of Jive ninja. So, which is great. We love Jive ninjas. I've got 2 of them in my team, but I didn't realise there was many Jive ninjas outside in other parts of Pearson. So, and we're poaching them from our competitors, which is even better.
Fabulous. I love it. That's great.
Anything you want to add, Maren and Dina?
No, I think you pretty much captured everything that we want to kind of convey and get Jive's help with.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that background. I think the best the best way is to just start digging right into some of those details of your story that we could really help to capture in a case study. And I hope it's okay. I'm going to record the conversation for our note taking, but would love to, I guess maybe we can start with the Advocates program and then go into a bit more about the Global English community. But would love to kind of back up a bit and hear more from you on some of the business drivers. You talked just, you know, at the end there, music to our ears about changing the conversation to the business value and driving ROI for the org. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your thoughts on, you know, how the Advocates program started 6 months ago and why, and, you know, what the results have been to date, and some of those details that we can capture in a case study.
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, we ran an advocate pilot, which was an in-person event with some key people. It was ring-fenced just to the US. But what we were looking to do is really explore how our employees could be activated to advocate on behalf of Pearson. So what did they need? You know, why would they want to advocate, and what, you know, did they need to know in order to be able to do that? So a large part of that event centered around giving them access to leadership, to our products, sort of, you know, loads of content that the kind of average employee wouldn't necessarily get access to. And they had this like really intense couple of days. And what we did is we turned the tables on them and said, okay, so you've had this amazing experience. Now tell us, you know, what we can do to make this kind of available beyond just a very small group of people, which, you know, we need to make more cost effective, because obviously we can't bring, you know, 35,000 people together physically with all those leaders all the time. It just isn't scalable. And so there were a couple of things that came out of that program which we've been implementing. One of them is a kind of discovery day where you discover our products in an actual physical sense. And the other thing is that we knew we needed to build a community. And so my team picked this up at the beginning of the year as one of our objectives. And we spent the first couple of months really just exploring what we thought we needed to do in order to make something that was accessible to all and that was scalable. So, you know, thinking about the usual challenges around being in a global organization, how do you make it relevant? You know, how do you make sure that people don't feel, you know, that they can't get involved and that it's accessible? And one of the challenges I think that we had was really, you know, in the program that they'd run in North America, they had asked people to submit a video and put through some really detailed, you know, requests and tell, you know, the people about themselves, and they were selected. And we felt that if we were going to build a community on Neo, that we had to take that step out. We felt like actually what we really needed to do, looking at kind of the challenges that Pearson had been facing, is really give people the opportunity to just come and, like, you know, explore and actually find out what was going on. And we had to give them something back before we could start asking them to actually be advocates. And that was quite a big turning point for us, because we just, you know, thought, okay, we can create an advocate program, tell them all these wonderful things that they can share about us, and it will be a winner. But actually, from listening to our employees and listening to some of the people that have been on the pilot, we realised that actually people needed to feel that love for Pearson internally before they could turn that into feeling love externally. So between Marandina, myself, and another member of our team, Amanda, we decided that we really wanted a rigorous plan for content. And I was quite strict about the fact that I didn't really want to go live until we were really clear, like, what we were going to communicate for the next couple of months, as opposed to just kind of having a sort of short-term plan and just going with it. And that was because I wanted to make sure that this wasn't like a big bang launch and then it kind of just sort of flopped and everyone went back to their day jobs and didn't keep coming back. So, you know, we worked really, really hard to think about what our employees would want to get from the advocate community, and we built some content around that. And then we also decided that we didn't want to go big bang. So we didn't do a big communication from our CEO. And we talked to other companies whose advocate programs are actually very driven by leadership. So I know IBM's program, for example, you know, is very much endorsed by their CEO. But we felt that that wouldn't have been the right thing for our community either. So it was very much a bottom-up campaign. And it kind of went viral. We invited the people that we knew would be interested, and then it's kind of grown from there. So we started off, I think it was about 100 people that we physically invited, and then sort of over a 2 or 3 week period, I think I invited another sort of 300 that were from some of our employee resource groups and so on. But we are now just over 5,500 people who have engaged with the community at some point. And I've got Catherine Everest, who's looking at 411 Labs for us, who's actually looking at the advocate community data to start giving me some really concrete numbers around what's the return rate, you know, what are people doing, how many of those people are active, and then what we're going to do is sort of look at, okay, well, how do we take people who are just engaged into kind of that next tier of sort of super advocates, if you like, as opposed to just somebody who's kind of engaged with the content. And so what Dina, Maren, Amanda and I are working on at the moment is, what does 2018 look like? So what's going to be included? And that's all stuff, the content that we're building based on the feedback that we've been getting from our advocate community. So every time we have a campaign, we have a webinar that supports it. It's 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the subject matter, but normally 30 minutes. We ask our businesses, teams, whoever's running the campaign, to answer 3 things. So they have to be really clear about what it is. They have to be really, really clear about how it supports our strategy. And then they have to be really clear about what the ask is from the advocate. So they can't just turn up and be like, oh yeah, we're doing this stuff and it's really great. They've got to be really specific about how it links to the strategic goals of Pearson, and they have to be really clear about what they're expecting from the advocates. And they always have to be online. So, you know, linking back to that accessibility piece, we've had a few people have come to us saying, oh, you know, we've got this great program happening in the UK. We would love to share it with the advocates. It's an in-person training. We're like, that's great, you can keep doing that, but we can't put it into the advocates program because it's not accessible to everybody. We've not always been great at doing the time zones, but we have made a conscious effort to put some of our training on to meet Australia and APAC, and obviously, you know, our colleagues who are kind of finishing up starting their day as we're sort of finishing up in like San Francisco, which is quite a big shift for Pearson because we are very UK East Coast centric, and where the webinars are obviously virtual, we have the ability to record all of them, and so they are accessible to anybody who has actually missed the session. So it's quite a simple program in terms of sort of how we share content, and it's completely wrapped up with, you know, super engagement from Mara, Dina and Amanda on various different topics. So we have a vlog which Dina does on a monthly basis. Sorry, that's me to pick my kids up, but my mum's doing it, so don't worry. So Dina has a vlog which is very, very targeted at a specific topic each month, which has been really exciting. So resiliency was a big thing for us. We focused one of the episodes on that. There was an episode that was supporting a big campaign around project literacy, and we've talked about diversity. So it's been, you know, very much aligned with what's going on, and Dina is working on what that looks like for next year to align again to the strategic priorities of the organisation. And that's where it's really critical, because I think advocate programs can have a habit of kind of steering off course. And, you know, we could be steered off course into all sorts of fun stuff, but it's like reining it back and being really clear about why it's sort of supporting the business. We've got a podcast series that we've had one episode, and it's going to grow through 2018, and that's really about getting under the skin of either a particular topic or a particular person, who's the people behind our, you know, products and services and that kind of thing. And then we've had some other things which are a bit more light touch. So because we use LinkedIn Elevate, the program in terms of driving people to advocate is very much around using LinkedIn Elevate, signing up, and then having the content that's curated for you. And from time to time, we take content that we've been sharing externally and bring it in-house. So, you know, hot topics have been around, you know, artificial intelligence, and, you know, lots of content about, you know, machines going to do away with all of our jobs, right down to, you know, sort of things around, you know, leadership, diversity, etc. And then we also have Dear Massey, which has been a little bit of an interesting experience for us, because it sort of started off as a, you know, just an idea of having like an agony aunt. You know, wouldn't it be great if anybody could ask any question anonymously? Obviously, Neo isn't anonymous. We've always sort of wrestled with, you know, are there times when it is nice to have something where you can sort of say what you're thinking? And so we created Dear Massey, which is where people have been able to ask anything, and they have. And we've had everything from someone's actually asking like a very businessy question this week in one of our US organizations. We've had questions about, you know, how do I navigate finance? I don't like Google. How can I get help? Down to some really, really personal. I'm really struggling with the change at Pearson. You know, my line manager is treating other people in the team with preferential treatment. And it's been a really, really nice way to bring in experts and people across our business to help answer that question. So Massey has always answered the question, but she brings in, you know, the experts, and actually we've really built out some, I think, fantastic ways to support the business and you know, raise the profile of some of the really great resources that we have to support our employees, which, you know, I think sometimes, you know, everyone kind of knows that they're there, but they won't necessarily think, oh, okay, yeah, I could use that in this example, or, you know, is it really confidential if I go and call up HR and tell them something and all that kind of stuff. So that's been a kind of, wasn't really something we were sort of setting out as a big objective for us, but actually it's ended up being something that's got quite the following. She's got quite the following. and it's really working. So that's kind of where we're at. As I say, it's the tip of the iceberg in terms of where we think this whole entire program is going to go. But if what's happened in the sort of last 6 months is anything to go by, and what we have planned for next year, I think it will keep going from strength to strength, because we've got that structure and the plan and the great people that are kind of community managing it behind it. And I'll stop there.
That's great. That's really useful background. And all of that you're referring to is specific to the Advocates program, right? Like the Ask Anything and all that. That's not necessarily open to all employees. It's just the folks who are.
No, it's open to all employees, because the Advocate program is open to all employees. So it's an open group on Neo.
Okay.
And actually, that's a really interesting thing, because we did have it as a kind of, was it a public restricted group? I actually brought this up at the EAB last week. And we learned a lesson, because by doing that, we were inviting these people, but they weren't able to find the join button. And we were like, why has nobody posted? And we were getting all these viewing figures, but no one was doing anything. And we realized none of them could do anything because it was on a restricted. So we had to quickly change the setting. And then I actually did a really, sorry, we made a massive mistake. We set the settings up wrong. Come and join us, come and comment, and then the snowball from there, which actually is one of the other things that we've been really authentic about, I think, in the community, is where we've got stuff wrong or it hasn't really interested people in the way we thought. We've just been sort of saying, yep, this didn't float your boat, we won't do this one again.
Right.
Or, you know, actually we've been pondering our own behaviours, and I think it's just the community's been really authentic, and that's one of the big things that we constantly tell, especially leaders, if you are unauthentic, people see straight through it, and I think that's what's driven a lot of the engagement.
Mm-hmm. And just to back up in terms of 2 years ago when you were starting that kind of in-person discussion and decided you wanted to have an advocacy program, what was the instigator for that? Was it just a recognition that this was working well for other companies and you wanted to have that at Pearson, or were there people coming to you saying, we want to be advocates but we don't know how? Like what?
Because we updated our brand.
Okay.
Yeah, so we rebranded at the start of, girls, you're going to have to help me out, 2016?
2016.
Got it. And so you wanted to get the word out and have some kind of employee flavored messaging around that.
And I think, if I remember rightly, it was timed about just before we made that transition. So they got some of the early viewing of the new brand and where we were headed. I would need to double check that fact, but I'm almost certain the Advocate event happened before the actual rebrand went live, but I can double check that. But it was, I think, a large part of that was about testing out. And if it was the other way around, it was still about how is the brand landing? Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the brand? And it was quite a big shift for us. I mean, our entire brand shifted because our entire organization shifted too. Like, we went from being, different organisations, FT, Penguin, and education, to being really clear that we're an education company, and really clear that we're a technology-driven education company. And the brand was very corporate, and we went and really shifted gears around, you know, being a lot more playful, a lot more consumer-led. And we really needed to help our employees understand that. And I think that's a really long journey. I mean, you know, that's not just about changing the logo.
Sure. And you talk about the campaigns. You have business folks come to you and say, we want to do this campaign with the advocates. Can you elaborate on that with any examples and talk about, you know, campaigns that you've done in this first 6 months that have been really tied to those priorities, and how?
So that was the stuff I was going to send you, Megan. So apologies.
Great. Okay, that'll be great.
So one of them was our sustainability report. So that was one of our very first campaigns. It was part of the kind of initial launch. And then just coming up this week, in fact, we've got a thought leadership webinar, which is wrapping up a couple of different campaigns that we've got going on externally. So we just launched a report about work skills 2030. So this is this whole, like, you know, a robot's going to steal our jobs.
Right.
And so we did that in partnership with Nesta, and we've also been running some really exciting podcasts which are exploring, you know, how do we get more women in technology, what are some of the barriers, what are some of the challenges, what are some of the opportunities, and that's a monthly podcast. So 2 of those have gone live, and so it's this kind of thought leadership piece. And then some of them have just been very basic, talking about our products. So we have a product in the UK, you might not know it in the US. It's a vocational qualification called BTEC.
Okay.
And we just really wanted to make people a bit more aware about our products. And actually, that's one of our plans for 2018, is to get a little bit more of a deeper dive into some of the products that we have that people might not necessarily know about, but they actually, you know, are the foundations of how we make money. And so people should really know, you know, what those products are. So that's another example. And then some of the things that we've done have been less about campaign and more about learning. So we did a series on resilience. We were running that ourselves within corporate affairs, and we decided to make that available to our advocates. I've been running numerous sessions on sort of personal branding around LinkedIn Elevate, and we've been running a couple of training sessions on using best judgment on social media. And those sorts of things have been really centered around giving back. So we felt like we needed to keep giving our advocates something before we were kind of putting in that, oh, and would you, you know, share a post about Project Literacy? Because, you know, they were feeling like, yeah, Pearson's a pretty awesome company. Of course I want to advocate for it. And then the other thing is that we have an Advocate of the Month. So this is just launched, this is in its 2nd month, and that's really about people nominating their colleagues, their peers, for advocating both internally and externally, and then us being able to use those examples for those personal peers, like people stories. So how do you advocate, you know, and what does good advocacy look like? And what we'll use that for next year is starting to shape, you know, actually being able to pinpoint what skills an advocate has. And if you don't have all those skills, then we help, you know, guide them to learn those skills through our learning platform.
Got it. And so in terms of the results you're seeing, I mean, I imagine the main goals and objectives are, you know, getting folks to share more about Pearson on LinkedIn or other places. Is that something you're tracking, and are you moving the needle yet? Or are there other objectives that, you know, you guys are really looking to drive?
So that's been the main driver for this year. And we are seeing the needle move. So we've gained, I think, something like 400 new users on LinkedIn Elevate, which is phenomenal. We're really, really excited about that. And our reach and the amount of content that's being shared. I mean, we went from kind of being really below LinkedIn's benchmark to smashing LinkedIn's benchmark. And I can share the data that we've got. They've just done a presentation actually on how we're doing.
Oh, good.
And it's really, really good. We're very, very happy because it's been quite hard. We've had LinkedIn Elevate for like 2 years and it's sort of been bobbing along. And then, you know, once we injected the combination of LinkedIn Elevate with a really, really tightly supported community behind it, we've seen the traction. So I can show you what that looks like. And then in terms of data, I was just flicking through my emails from Catherine because I know she's done quite a big piece of work for me. I need to dig it out because what I've asked Catherine to look at, she's specifically looking to help us break out the advocate community between who's just come for, you know, a visit because something caught their eye, to who are our returning sort of people, and then, you know, do they return ever in that kind of 6-month period, so they sort of drop in and out, and then we can start to target, well, you know, why didn't they come back, so we can do some focus groups, and then if they are coming back, what do they like, what can we do more of, and then where are they coming from. So, you know, have we got a really, really big cohort of people in our advocate community in North America versus Australia? Well, you know, that might be because we've not put enough effort into making stuff available to them in their time zone, etc. So we don't know what that looks like, but that's what our sort of plan of action for next year will be, to make decisions based on data, which I've never really properly done with Jive before. I mean, I've made assumptions and I've gone with my gut, and I think that's where that story sort of shifts a bit for us. It's like, you know, when you think about the community maturity, it's like we're actually making really, you know, joined up adult decisions based on data, and that's really what's going to drive, you know, the plan for next year. And I think really that is what Dina was talking about in her presentation at Jive World, is how you sort of start to, you know, to mine data to help you with your decision-making process.
Yeah. Are you looking at things like sentiment analysis, or looking at, you know, who the influencers and connectors are within the advocates community that are bringing more folks in? Like, is that the level that you're getting into?
We're not there yet. So at the minute, we're just looking at who those people are and, you know, where in the business they sit. And then we need to start doing that kind of sentiment piece and saying, okay, well, how do we measure that? And how do we, because that's one of the questions we need to answer. Like, we might have 5,000 people, but are they the people we really want?
Right.
That sounds awful to say.
Right. No, that makes sense. Well, I'm just to do a time check. I realized I scheduled the meeting for only 30 minutes, but we've just been chatting away. Do you guys have a little bit more time? I have a couple more questions I'd love to get on, or we can do follow-up.
I can keep going until the Rugrats get here, and then it'll get very interesting.
Oh, I know how it goes, yes. Luckily, mine just left right before the call. So, well, I was curious in terms of, from a technology perspective, like, is the advocates community in NEO integrated with LinkedIn Elevate, or is it just easier to access because you have links and you can send people off to go share content? Like, how does that process or workflow actually work for one of your advocates?
So they're not integrated at all. The way it works is that within NEO, from time to time, we will post permalinks to LinkedIn Elevate crafted or curated content, which might drive someone to sign up to LinkedIn Elevate. But actually, what the first step was to actually build a home for LinkedIn Elevate in NEO. And, you know, we had it sort of, it was in NEO, but it didn't really have a proper place to live. So, you know, if I'd just signed up for LinkedIn Elevate, you know, I wouldn't even know where to start with going to ask for a question, or, you know, who was really running it. It was quite a group of different people. And what we've done is we've made it kind of embedded into the heart of the Advocate program. So it has its own page. You know, we've recorded training that's available in Neo. So if you miss one of the live sessions, you can quickly get up to speed with what LinkedIn Elevate is about. And actually, all of that was driven by a survey that we did very early this year, where we basically went out to all the LinkedIn Elevate users, and almost half of them were inactive. And we were like, why are you not using, you know, LinkedIn Elevate? You posted once and you've not been back for 6 months. Like, you know, what's going on?
Yeah.
And a lot of it was like they were really not clear about what its purpose was. There wasn't great content that they were interested in, and it needed some TLC. And so very quickly, that's why we sort of set up the page on LinkedIn, on Neo, as a kind of place to drive that traffic, because I knew I could communicate really easily on email to those people because I had their email addresses. But that's not really very helpful because it's not going to pick up new users. You know, it's the same old thing that everyone hates about email. It's between 2 people or 3 people or whatever. So we knew we needed to start having those discussions more in the community. So that's how it works. It's not integrated. I can't really see how it would be integrated, but that doesn't really seem to be an issue. And to be honest, whether you use LinkedIn Elevate or whether you just want people to go and, you know, share your content, the fact is you need somewhere in your community for people to know that there's stuff out there for you. So if you have a content tool like LinkedIn Elevate, great, but you need to get people to it. And if you don't have a content tool, then you could easily do it through Neo.
Yeah. And are you looking? I'm not super familiar with LinkedIn Elevate, but is it? I'm imagining it primarily works with LinkedIn. Like, are you looking at other social channels where you want people to share, like Twitter?
So it allows you to share to Twitter and to Facebook simultaneously. So that's one of the benefit of LinkedIn Elevate is twofold. One, it curates content for you. So if you're not somebody who's used to scanning the internet for really interesting articles, they're already there for you.
Right.
And very specific to education, because obviously they're tailored to Pearson, but there are also stuff around leadership, you know, diversity, etc. The second thing is it acts as a scheduling tool. So the average person who logs into LinkedIn will share a few things, spam their community, and then maybe don't go back in for a couple of days. What LinkedIn Elevate allows you to do is spread that content over a week, and it allows you to post it on multiple platforms. So we're sort of saying to people, if you're, you know, time is, you know, precious, you can pop in on a Monday and stack up some content through the week, and you know, you'll pop that content through your social media a bit more effectively.
Got it. Okay, that's great. And I think, you know, one of the things in terms of packaging up the case study is obviously, I'm sure you know, we're always trying to quantify as much as possible and have some kind of, you know, ROI or specific business related results that we can include. And so maybe that's in some of the content that you're sending me, but I don't know if there's any we can touch on now, or if that's something we can follow up on, is how can we kind of talk about it, you know, from a quantitative perspective as well?
So if we only used the reach that we've had in terms of the social media reach, then hang on a second, let me just, because there's other ways that I think we could think about how we would measure it, but let me just, I'm just going to share my screen 1 second. So this will look like, oh, hang on, how do I share my screen?
Oh, maybe I have to let
Presenter.
Make presenter there. Now does it? Will it let you?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So ignore that massive drop. That's because November is already quite a small month, so it's a bit skewed. But obviously, as the month spreads out, that goes up. But this starts here at January. And so you can see that, you know, it has been growing. Now we've had a couple of quiet, the last couple of weeks have been a little bit quiet. We've had a little bit less content. I've actually been less in the community. So it just goes to show the second you drop the ball a little bit, it does have an impact, but I'm quite expecting it to go back up because we've got about 100 new people joining this month from all the training that we've been doing last week. So that will go back up. So I'm not particularly concerned, but you can see straight away here, you know, from an earned media value, and LinkedIn's quite good because they assign quite moderate costs to this stuff. So, you know, you could inflate it, but they try and just, you know, be quite realistic. You know, that's the kind of level of media value that we've got from LinkedIn shares, from Facebook, from Twitter. And so we've got data that goes sort of right the way across in terms of ROI that we can draw on. I can share the deck that that LinkedIn sent and pull from that what, you know, you think would be most exciting for the case study.
Yeah, that would be great. Perfect. And then in terms of just thinking about the overall impact to the organization, I'm curious how you would summarize or characterize, you know, how the advocates community is in its early days, at least, you know, helping the organization as a whole.
So I'm not sure how we would word this, so I'm going to be really honest in this call, but we probably need to be a bit more careful about how we probably present it. But I would say that we had well, we still have, but we're working on it, some serious morale issues across Pearson. You only have to look at our Glassdoor profile to see, you know, how people feel about the organisation. And I would say that in the last 3 months, I've definitely seen a shift in terms of how people are perceiving Pearson. And we've seen that from kind of John's global calls and the feedback that we've been getting to, you know, just kind of the conversations that are happening on Neo and the coffee water cooler moments and all that kind of stuff, that there's definitely a shift. And I don't think we can say all of that is because of the advocate community, but I think what the advocate community was setting out to do was drown out the noise from the people who are cynical and, you know, just stir up, you know, the bad vibes in the Neo community. And we've looked at some different ways to kind of stamp some of that stuff out. You know, we'd had a couple of issues with different sort of conversations that had happened that had stirred up, you know, some pretty difficult conversations with people around politics and stuff. And it was in danger of being a little bit toxic. And I think what we've tried to do, and you know, Maren, Dina, Amanda and myself were like, you know what, let's just, you know, drown out the noise with all the really, really good stuff. So we're not saying that there isn't some bad stuff happening, and, you know, we're still going through a massive reorganization. So there is still going to be bad news for some people in the organization, and there's going to be changes. But let's stop focusing on that. And let's focus on the good stuff. And I always describe it like we're going to lose 10% of our employees over the next 2 years, but we're going to keep 90% of them. So we need to give that 90% of people a reason to stay and a reason to want to continue to work at Pearson. And I think that's what we were really trying to set out. The advocate community was just turn the noise up and the volume up on the good stuff. And I would say that I think, you know, largely we've done that. What I probably need to talk to the girls about is some sort of end of year feedback where we're able to kind of, there you go, there's one.
Love it.
Hello. To get some anecdotal stuff, but I think that would be relatively easy to support that. Oh, wow.
That'd be great.
Oh, for Tate, it's his birthday. Yeah. Okay, only 1 minute, okay? Good boy.
We can wrap up. That's all really great background, and we can of course work with you on the best way to kind of frame that piece of the story. Because I think it's important, but obviously we don't want to highlight, you know, some of the more difficult things that the organization is going through. We want this to be a very, you know, positive reflection.
One way to talk about it might just be that, you know, sometimes there's stuff on your communities, you know, you'll have the people that stir up the trouble
Yeah.
and the negative vibes, especially when you're going through change.
Right.
How do you manage that? And actually an advocate program during that time of change is actually a really good way
Yeah.
to support that change in a positive way.
That's a great point, and I think especially with what you were saying about the angle of addressing mature communities and how do you evolve a mature community. This is something that every community is going to go through at some point in time. So I think that's a good way to frame it. Well, why don't we wrap up? I would love to see that ROI deck from LinkedIn or any other background materials that you think will help, and then Becky and I will kind of huddle and maybe email you if there are other things we think would be useful that we can kind of follow up with one off as we start to pull the case study together.
Cool. Okay, awesome. Sorry, I've got to run. It's good to catch up.
Have a lovely evening. Thanks for all the background. It was really interesting.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, what's the matter with you?